Hi, Sonia.
Hello.
Hello.
And that's a Lola Fa? Is it
Lola
Lola?
Kabowale.
What the hell?
Lola
Lola
Fabowale.
Fambawale. Okay.
Yeah.
Oi.
And Sonia?
Yes, hello,
Hello?
everyone.
Good,
Hi,
good.
Lola. Hi, Chester. Good
Hi. Hey,
morning.
hey.
We'll kickstart in 3 minutes. Exactly 3 minutes we'll kickstart.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chester,
Yes.
do you by any chance they have that, there's a man in a yellow robe in your book. Do you have that picture with you?
And and yes.
Like,
Princess?
Yes, the standing woman, the standing person in yellow.
yes, I would like to talk something about that. If we can show the audience later on.
Oh, perfect,
Uh,
perfect.
Okay.
Okay. Should I show it as a share screen or
It will be
just
good
hold
as
up?
a shared screen.
You prefer a share screen? Okay.
Yeah, so everybody can see.
Okay. It's good to know, so I can pull it up now.
Okay.
Hold on. Mm. Okay, is there any other image that that needs to be pulled up?
Possibly the one with the mummy with the night sky. You know, the night sky and the golden tomb. Is it someone in a tomb? One of the pharaohs. And there's
Oh,
the
okay.
night sky.
King Tut. In his
Oh, that's King Tut?
in his coffin of eternity.
Ah, okay. Yeah, that one. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, where was that?
Sorry guys, I just need to check something.
Okay.
From that.
Professor Koulibaly, good to see you. All right.
I'm getting close to it. I have to go back and find it again.
Okay. When you find it, we can start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, let's see. I found it and put it on my desktop. Okay, now let me simplify my desktop. Does anyone like the image of Lalabella at night? If not, I'll put that up.
For sure.
Okay, I'll hold that one up there then. Okay, now my desktop is not too busy. Okay, good. I have the actually it was a woman in the passageway with the chiffon. The chiffon, is that the right color? Is that
Yes, the yellow one.
Yeah, and then the picture of His Majesty King Tut in one of his golden coffins, one of his 3 golden coffins. And then I took out a picture of the vertical of one of the churches from Lalabella, Georgis at night.
All right. Let's get started.
Okay.
Well, I would like to seize this singular opportunity to start by thanking all of those in the audience. I want to welcome you. While I'm welcoming you, I would like to thank the Pan-African Writers Association and its diasporic arm, WAFORD, that is Writers of African Origins in the Diaspora, for hosting this event. There are other sponsors: Tuskegee University, the Andrew Mellon Foundation, the Tuskegee University Interdisciplinary Seminar Series, and a host of others. We would like to acknowledge them. I am really privileged to have Chester Higgins on this show. I would tell you, he is somebody I call brother, not just to pay lip service. He is a brother indeed. And he would tell you a lot more in the discussion, I guess. A Hall of Famer, a reputable photographer for New York Times for over four decades, somebody who has Africa at heart. Few are those who have Africa at heart as Chester Higgins does. I can attest, for the past 50 years, he's been on the continent at least twice every year. And I actually had the luck to catch Chester this time. He's on his way to Rwanda. I said I'll catch him before he leaves for Africa so that he could tell us about his fabulous adventures, educate us, take us to a journey back to the source. Because many, many, many people do not understand that Africa is that source spring, that source where everything springs from. And we tend to minimize it, but Chester has done a phenomenal job. Amongst many others, his Sacred Nile is a masterpiece that speaks to everyone of African descent. And that journey, I feel, is a journey we should undertake. We should not relent. I know in this conversation, it will be an interaction between Chester Higgins and Rumbi Chen, our anchor lady here, and I will give them the floor to say a word before I'll hand over to Rumbi Chen. You have the floor. You take it out.
Thank you, Professor D. I'm Rumbi Chen, short for Rumbi Dai Chennai, and originally I'm from Fakose, a ghetto in Zimbabwe, in Harare. I live in Australia. I hold my culture to heart. I believe no matter where I go, what I eat, what I wear, I'll always be Zimbabwean. I'll always be an African. That's all I can say for now. Thank you.
All right.
Over to you.
Unmute Chester and say a word before you engage in the interactions. Yeah.
So my name is Chester Higgins. I'm honored to be here with you guys discussing our first love, Mother Africa. And I, as a native of Alabama, went to Tuskegee, and there I discovered my lifelong friendship with fellow students, African students, and their music and their literature. And that has led me on a quest since my first visit to Africa in '71 to go to Africa every year, sometimes twice a year, to learn more about my cousins, to learn more about the expressions of who the multivariate expressions of who I and we are as a people. And the more I learned, the digger like a miner, the deeper I dig, the more impressed I am. And I try to share that through my photography and my books with my fellow audience. My growing up in everybody, we all have our emotional histories. My emotional history is that if you grow up as an oppressed person in America, you are automatically, but one, if you're a Christian, and one, if you're in this political environment, you're automatically made to feel that you are less valuable than white people than your neighboring white people. Not only less valuable, but you have no history, you have no agency, you have no worth. Now, we all know that that's not true, but saying it's not true and acting and disregarding it is one thing, but then trying to dig for the evidence, the irrefutable evidence that shows our historic agency is something that we all could benefit from. So I had to learn myself how to develop the tools to push back on the oppressor's narrative, number one. And then once I developed those tools in the Booker T. Washington fashion of sharing with our neighbors and bringing up our friends and community to make that same information available so that everybody instantly becomes an expert, so that everybody instantly knows that their whole conversation is broadened because they now see information. And I say see information because I found out early that, the human mind is more influenced by what it sees than what it reads. It doesn't necessarily the mind can grasp things that it sees and run with it a lot faster. And that's what made me become a photographer rather than a writer, because a writer's work is never done. But a photograph, if it's done well, does not need translation. Everybody can understand it. So my job as an artist has been, how do I develop the visual language so effectively that I can make compelling images that not only look beautiful, but have layers of information for those of us who want to dig deeper into that. And after 5 decades, I produced Sacred Now, looking at the ancient migratory route, the Blue Nile, between ancient Ethiopia, ancient Sudan, Nubia, and ancient Kemet, Egypt. It's not my first long-term book. In 1994, after 25 years of work, I produced a book on the African diaspora, first looking at the migratory routes on the continent itself, and then the secondary routes across the Atlantic Ocean, and finally the tertiary routes back to Europe to former capitals. So I've done shorter books in the meantime, but those are the two most, I think, most important books. And I'm happy here to discuss this with you. And Rumi, I think, has some images that I hope some of you have seen this book. If you have not, then I can share. We can go through what the book looks like. But I think Rumi has some images that she finds particularly important to highlight. And why don't we do that now? Rumi, should I do a share and we show those images?
In 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, you can share. Just I'll ask you to share. But I just want to say something. I would like to thank Power and WAFORD for this opportunity, and everyone in the audience. Just a few house rules, maybe one rule. All your questions, we will have a Q&A session 45 minutes before the end of this discussion. So just hold them up, note them down, or you can raise your hand later on. So keep all your questions. I have this tripod with me here. It's probably, to me, it's just a $5 tripod. It's broken, but to Chester here, the word tripod means so much more to you. It means purpose, meaning, and that has seen you go to Egypt more than 20 times. You've been to Ethiopia, Sudan, to bring us this journey, the sacred Nile that you were taking us through. And of all places, what gave you the urge? I know you had an assignment, a work assignment to take you to Egypt, but before you went there, did you know you would embark on this 50-year-old journey?
Unmute, Chester. You're muted. Okay.
Thank you very much. I have to say that Egypt was an accident for me, discovering Egypt, because, we African Americans are sort of, how do I say this? If we consider Africa at all, we consider West Africa, because then we're looking at what we think as the slave transit points. In 1973, in May of 1973, because of my interest in African politics, I went to Addis Ababa for the 10th anniversary of what was then called the OAU, now called the AU. There I saw, for a week, I witnessed plenary sessions and heads of states going back and forth, and I made this portrait of His Majesty Haile Selassie that I opened my book, Feeling the Spirit, with in '94. This is in May. In September, I'm invited to go on a press junket by a friend of my father, who was an editor at Jet Ebony, Peter Bailey, who was a senior editor in New York City of Ebony, and who was a former secretary to Malcolm X when he broke away from the Nation of Islam. So I didn't really know what to expect. I'm going on this 10-day junket, and, I'll see some pictures. And I get there, and I'm really bowled over in awe of the architecture at first. And then I'm in awe of, first the pyramids that you can see 5 miles from downtown Cairo out on the distance. A mountain that was made not vertically, but horizontally, that just blows your mind, that sort of commands the landscape. And then to go into the museums and see these figurines, these statuary, and these paintings. And it dawns me, I'm looking at Black people. And then it dawns me, because I have to think that, well, what have I been taught about Egypt? I have been taught to hate Egypt because of the Old Testament. I have been taught that the Egyptians are horrible people, and had no sense of sacredness to themselves, and that were horrible oppressors of the Israelites. So this was a big awakening for me because I had to reconcile what was the history that could not have been destroyed and what has been the narrative that I have grown up with as a Christian. Now, Egypt is a big place, and we start out in Cairo and we go down to Luxor. And in Cairo, you see the pyramids, but only in Luxor do you see the huge temples, but more importantly, the tombs. And here in Luxor, as I'm going through one of the big temples, the Temple of Amen, that's spelled Amen. You may have heard that word before. The biggest temple that they now, that is called Karnak. And I'm looking again, and I'm seeing all of these images of priests baptizing the Pharaoh. Of course, I learned later that there's no such word as Pharaoh in Egyptian language, it's Per'ah. And here you have them on their knees, and here you have the Holy Family. Now, all of a sudden, this makes sense. We have a Holy Family in the Bible, but it's always been strange that you have a family without a woman. But in the Egyptian wall motifs, you have the mother, the father, and the son. So it was mind-blowing to just try to process what I'm seeing. And then something happens that really changed things for me. The October 73 war broke out. Egypt attacked Israel. Now, how did that affect me? It meant that all the airports shut down. It meant that I was stuck in Egypt for another month, not just 10 days, but another month. So what was supposed to be a 10-day trip became a 6-week trip. But because I had been excited by what I'd been seeing, I then spent every day going back and forth to the museum, going to different sites, and just begin this whole process of researching exactly who are these people and what is going on and why haven't I heard about it? And that research began in September of 73 and has continued. I've become essentially an independent Egyptologist over time. And I've learned that I've come across all the banter that Egyptologists will throw at and throw at you, and learned that essentially Egyptology was a discipline made to uproot the memory of Africa for African people, to create it to not acknowledge it being in Northeast Africa, and the highest of civilization, of Africans in world civilization, but to create this fantasy space over here called the Middle East. So you have a professional, you have a narrative, a false narrative that's been invested in over time by all of these people who are Egyptologists. And it's just taken, and I got to know those people, but I also got to know people who were not bowled over by the dissonance of Egyptology and who began to see it for themselves. Not only Black people like Malana Karenga, but white Egyptologists as well. So I got to know who's who. I got to know the territory because Egypt, the study of Egypt is so vast. Because you're talking about a civilization that existed about 7,000 years. So that Europeans are quick to tell you that, well, Egypt was a multiracial society. Well, if you look at the last 1,000 years after it was being invaded by foreigners, yes, that's true. But if you look at the foundational substance of the pharaonic culture, then you know it's all African. And if you look at the language, and Sheikh Anta Diop pointed out very clearly that if you look at the glyphs, you're looking at all of natural imagery that is from their location, that only exists in Egypt, does not exist in Mesopotamia, does not exist in Europe. And then you look at the engravings on the wall, and you see here all of the many different biblical stories that have their antecedents in Egyptian spiritual mythology. So it's been a great trip, a journey, and it's been great in learning this journey. And in fact, I, as a photographer, started out loving black and white because I thought black and white was was a pure form of capturing human emotion. And then in 94, no, 92, I took my teenage son, who was really being an asshole to his mother because we were divorced. And so she begged me to do something with him. So I said, well, let me take him with me on my trip to Ethiopia and Egypt for 6 weeks. And I know he can't speak Arabic and he can't speak Amharic, so he has to talk to me. So that was a very good experience for both of us. But on that trip, my son made an observation that was kind of disturbing, but I dealt with it. One day we're in Egypt and he says to me, he says, Dad, he said, why are you making pictures in black and white when there's so much color on these things? And so being a purist about black and white, I had to find somewhere in my heart not to strangle him and listen, that maybe the kid had a point. And then um, from 73 to 92, I've been shooting black and white in Egypt. And I decided, okay, maybe I should change the colors. I didn't have to reshoot everything, but I know now what was most important. But I had to reshoot those things that I really felt were important. And that's how we have this book in color, where all my other books have been in black and white. Well, actually, this is my second book in color because my first book was in color was on ancient Nubia, where there was a group of 12 Egyptologists who decided to look at Nubia not through the eyes of ancient Egypt, which had cast a shadow upon the Nubian culture, but through the eyes of Nubia. And, so much of the problem is the fact that, the language has not been translated. But my pictures became the basis for defining what that book looks like. And all the in situ photographs are mine. So I'm very proud of that. But that came out of that body of work that I've been doing on the Blue Nile for Sacred Nile.
Wow, that's profound, Chester. And I know in some other recordings you've said that you don't take pictures, you make pictures. And
Absolutely.
now with this journey, I believe what you've done, there was a lot of miseducation regards to Egypt. And in this book, you journey us into reversing those narratives. Now, may you take us into the book? Maybe we can start with what's your favorite picture, or would you want the yellow one? I'm inclined to the yellow lady, but you can start with any picture you would want to share with us. And then you also take us into that journey where we see what you made out of your trip to Egypt.
Okay, I will share with you. I must say to you, I do not have a favorite picture.
Okay.
Every picture I make is a favorite. I
Wow.
think there's a trap if one tries to do. I was taught by one of my mentors that there's a trap if you want to have a favorite something, then why keep working? So, but make each picture, work hard to make each picture a favorite picture. So now let me do a screen share and we can do desktop. Am I gonna do this? Documents. Okay,
It really is breathtaking, the depth of what you've done with the book.
I haven't done this in such a long time, so I hope this will work. This being recorded, maybe is can you see in it? Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, now can you see I brought the book up. Can you see that?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, good.
Yes, we can see the cover.
Very good. Okay.
Well done.
So this first picture, the book covers is a picture I made in that original trip of 1973 of the Theban Mountains. And it wasn't until 20 years later that I began to understand hieroglyphs and realize that this particular shape underneath the sun, that little indention in the landscape represents a foreign land. And that's because Akhenaten, who founded the new city of Amana, chose his city, founded because of that. The sun fell over the mountains that way. Now, here's a picture to start it all off. Where do we begin? In Ethiopia, there was a discovery made of a fossilized skeleton. And it was called, most people have heard this name, it's been called Lucy, as Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Well, the Ethiopians don't call her Lucy, they call her Dinkonesh, which means you're a wonder. So this is a 3.2 million year old fossilized skeleton of our beginning mother in the Horn of Africa, Lucy. Then I look at how our people feel so at home, what home feels like. And here you have these young men on the tributary of the Blue Nile. And because of studying Egyptology, I realized that the Egyptians felt that the Nile was God's gift to them. It gave them the water to feed themselves or grow them crops, purify themselves, what have you. But they were also watchers of the night sky. That's how we get our calendar. The Egyptians are the ones who sorted out where we were in the universe and how things move and gave us the seasons. And they believed that in the night sky was just as giving as the Nile River. In fact, they call the Milky Way the Nile River in the sky. Now, for years, I would fly back and forth to from Egypt to Ethiopia, but while in Egypt, it was always amazing. I found, why is it that the river went north? Most of all other rivers on the planet go south. This is the only river that goes north, and I couldn't figure that out. And it took me years of reading Egyptian books about how they used and navigated that river. The Egyptians used the fact that the current went north as a way to travel with their ships towards the Mediterranean without the need of a sail. And then because the wind came off the Mediterranean going south, they then used the sail to go back up. This became interesting as I began to understand the use of the concept among ancient Egyptians of Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. So by this topographical map I had made, but after one day of flying to Ethiopia, and I kept noticing on the TV screens how the plane kept climbing. And that made me curious. So I came back and I started looking for topographical maps of East Africa. And that's when I discovered the Nile Trench. That's when I discovered why is it that the Nile goes north. Because it starts out, if you look on the right-hand side, where it says Lake Tana, that little blue spot on the top of the gray, Lake Tana is 6,000 feet above sea level. That's where the Blue Nile begins. It empties out of that lake and falls down the Nile Trench. It falls down to Khartoum, then it falls to the Third Cataract, then to Cairo, and finally empties into the Mediterranean. A very unique phenomenon in terms of the world. And then I provide this map also. We're talking Ethiopia, where the Nile is, and under the ancient name Aksum. Then we look at Sudan, and we see the three political entities of Nubia, Meroe, and Kush. And that's where the Blue Nile River ends, because in Khartoum, it's joined by the White Nile. And then it becomes the Nile River, and it goes into Kemet. Now, I'm going back to Rwanda in a few weeks, and I was there a couple of years ago, and that's when I discovered that the White Nile has a story too. But the White Nile begins actually in the mountains that border the Congo and Rwanda, and the culture of but the people have a cow culture that the Egyptians were so much into that I've just begun to investigate, and it gives me some insight about the meaning of the cows in the Egyptian culture. Here, you're looking at the Blue Nile coming out of the mountains of Ethiopia on its 1,000-mile trek down to the Mediterranean. Now, there's something very interesting I have to share with you about this Blue Nile. 90% of the water that gets to Egypt comes from this waterfall right here that you're looking at. That's why recently, when the Ethiopians decided they want to build a dam called the GERD, the Grand Ethiopian, I forget the Arab Dam, the Egyptians went batshit. They wanted to say, if you stop the water, that means an Egyptian child will die, and we're going to go to war with you. Well, Ethiopians had to remind them, well, this water is our water. It does not begin in Egypt; it ends in Egypt. And you have been using free water for millennium without paying for it. This is our water that we want to build a dam to industrialize our country for. Now, this is not the first time that the Ethiopians had this vision of building this dam to industrialize their country. Haile Selassie had the same vision. In fact, the same dam that Haile Selassie envisioned is the one that's there now. But Selassie didn't have the money. It's a poor country. He went to the international lending societies, the World Bank, the IMF. None of them would loan him the money, not because they didn't want to, but because the Egyptian government successfully blocked their applications. So when Meles Zenawi came to power about 20 years ago, he said, okay, we Ethiopians are going to finance this $6 billion dam ourselves. We are going to sell bonds to each other. Nobody else can buy it. I tried to buy bonds. I'm a foreigner. They wouldn't sell it to me. But the Ethiopians themselves raised enough money so that they were able to build their own dam. And they brought in Italian contractors and Chinese contractors, and that dam is now working. Here is a tributary, another tributary to that dam, to that waterfall. Then looking in Sudan, I'm looking at the ancient religious expression, spiritual expression. And here's a temple to the lion of Pertinent. The lion of Pertinent took the same place as the ram Amen of the Egyptians. And if you look, the second figure from the left is the ruler, and the ruler is a woman. And that woman's title, and the Bible corrupted the title. The English corrupt everything when it comes to African. If you read the Bible where it says Kendaki, the Kendaki went to Solomon to visit. They got it almost right but they spelled it not as Kendaki, they spelled it Candace. But in the Meroitic languages, Kendaki is a title of a ruling female ruler. And you see what we will call the fecundity of the female ruler. And here's what some of the temples look like in Luxor. This is what the Ethiopian highland, most of the people live on, you have two groups of people in Ethiopia. The ruling class live on the highlands. That's from 5,000 feet to 15,000 feet. The other group that are not the ruling class live in what's called the lowlands, which goes down to the desert. The highlanders, the big mountain range they call is Simeon. And this is looking at the Simeon mountain range from about 12,000 feet above sea level. This is looking at one of the largest, there are three main largest pyramids in Egypt. The Pyramid of Khufu at sunrise. And Khufu was an incredible character. And that's Khufu, if you want to Google that. And then here's looking at his son's pyramid behind the Sphinx, this Pyramid of Menkaure. And then you're looking at a Sphinx, which was a temple that looks like a Sphinx in Kerma in Sudan. They call it Afufa. Here's the Nile coming out of Ethiopia, coming out of the mountains of Ethiopia, running down to Egypt. And then here in Sudan, you have the famous pyramids at Meroe. In fact, there are 4 times as many pyramids in Sudan as there are in Egypt. However, they are different. They have 2 main differences. One is that the Egyptian pyramids are perfect 25-degree angle pyramids. 45-degree angle pyramids, whereas the Sudanese pyramids are 60 degrees. The Sudanese pyramids, the tomb is dug out underneath the rock first before and the pyramid is built on top of it. In the Egyptian pyramids, the structure itself is built in such a way that there are interior rooms that are still not collapsed, that where the body is buried. And then in Lalibela, Ethiopia, or in the 13th century, they went to this mountain range, Lasta mountain range, and they dug out the footprint for 12 churches. And then they hollowed out the rock going down. And by doing that, they were able to make churches that are actually inside the living rock. They did this for two political reasons. One is that before the 13th century, Christians would trek to Jerusalem every year thinking that's the Holy Land, the holy city to go to before you die. They make that trek, just like Muslims want to go to Mecca before they die. Over time, the invading Muslims who came to Egypt in the 6th century decided that they wanted those Ethiopians to convert. They either had to convert to Islam voluntarily or by the sword. So, and at the same time, they were invading Ethiopia, attacking churches and villages and burning them up. So the politicians or the king at that time, Lalibela said, let's build subterranean churches. Then that means that when the invading Muslims come and they look through their telescopes, they won't know where we are. Because when they look through their telescopes and they see churches, then they know to take their army there. But here, all the people can gather. They are subterranean. The armies won't spot them. And that's led to this holy city of Lalibela that is like the African Mecca for Christians. Here you have another Kandake, Kandake, a queen. This queen sitting under her canopy. The canopy is here, the golden canopy on her throne. And a lion is part of her throne. And we have what's called the tankwa, which is a boat made of papyrus. Now, this technology, it was used all up and down the Nile River. We find it among the Egyptians. In the tomb of Tutankhamun, we find him standing on a craft that was like a skateboard made out of papyrus that allowed them during the inundation. The inundation meant that all of Egypt was flooded for 3 or 4 months. And they had these buildings that were built higher than the water level. But in order to get to these buildings in the flood, you had to use a tankwa device to go to a boat to go back and forth. This is in an Egyptian tomb, the tomb of Ipi, which shows the stations of prayer. You're kneeling on their knees, prostrating yourself down, that still you find that Muslims and Christians do until this day.
Oh, yes.
See, the Muslims, here on the left, you see Hebrews in Ethiopia. I don't say Jews because Jews is a European term from a European experience. So Black Jews, so to speak, call themselves Hebrews, not Black Jews. And then you have a Muslim in Ethiopia. You have an ancient priestess from Ethiopia. You have
just to hold you there, Chester, you've mentioned the priestess, you mentioned the queen earlier in another one. So we see that back then in ancient Egypt, women had almost like an equal, not equal, but they had expression. So when did this marginalization of women come about along the chain? Women shouldn't hold places in worship, women should just be in the background.
It came about during the patriarch period, and actually, I did a film. I made a film on this. See, when the patriarchs came, before the patriarchs, the woman had equal amount of sacred capacity. And that's why you had the Holy Family. You had the man, woman, and child because it represented a balance. The first thing when the man took over religion and the patriarch religion, the first thing he did to the woman is he made her evil. He made her a sin. He made her the creator of sin by touching the apple, and by made her the what we call the sort of Christian side of thing. We're born on an original sin. So the patriarch, the male, stripped a woman of all of her divine qualities. He made her the enemy. He ghosted her out. She was no longer a part of the Holy Family. You have man, woman, and a ghost. He then decided that he will, what's the word for it? He would amplify anything negative about her. So she became the whore. She became the wench. And you look at, and this was taken to such extremes that this gave birth to in Europe, where you had hunts for witches and burning women at the stake. But it all came out of the male mind, the patriarch mind. It was not out of the Egyptian or the African mind. And this is the first real indication of this corruption that took place. And from there on, the woman was demonized. Now, and it's still in Christian societies, it is still the case. The woman goes and she hears the man gives her instruction on how to be a good Christian. And in parts of Africa, women who believe in nature, which was what these women who in this dress represent, are not now demonized and otherized, and also object of abuse and mutilation. But this is all the work of the man. This also, I believe, shows why I think that the male species is inherently emotionally unstable, because it's put itself into this particular bind. It's kind of like what and it doesn't realize that it's still suffering from it. Here you have the royal woman, the wife of Ramses the Great, Nefertari in her tomb. In her tomb, giving obeisance to female figures of deity, not to male figures of deity. In the women's tomb, you will not see any one man. In the men's tomb, you may or may not see a woman. If it's in a royal tomb, you won't see a woman. You will see, the only woman you will see is Nut. Why Nut? Nut is the most important woman that they just could not get rid of. Nut represents the mother of the universe in the night sky. She's idealized as a woman with a long, lean body, as a picture of her leaning over in a downward dog position. And what she's leaning over is the rounded portion of the globe. And she's in a particular formation. Her arms are stretched out to the west, and her feet in the downward dog position are nestled into the east. And why is this? This is fundamental to Egyptian religion. Fundamental. In the west, when the tired sun goes down, her long arms stretching out to the western horizon becomes the runway for the tired sun to travel up, and to be swallowed in her mouth. Where the sun for the next 12 hours is recharged by her body. And as the sun goes through her body at night, she wears a dress that has holes in it, and those become the twinklings of the stars. See this picture? Look at the upper right corner. You see those stars? They become the twinklings of the stars. And then early morning, because her foot is planted on the east, the sun will rise, always rises on the east. That's when the sun comes out of her womb with the help of the power of Amen, comes out of her womb and lightens, tears back the darkness of the sky and lights the heavens again. This is a fundamental belief of Egyptians, that there is continuity in life. That like everything in life is given a second chance. It's called tomorrow. That's what Nut represents. She represents tomorrow. She represents the bridge between yesterday and tomorrow. She represents the birth of the sun. And it's the sun that then brings to life everything else that is underneath it. It brings, as above, the life of above then energizes all the life below. Think about it. If the sun went out for a week, we would all be in very bad shape. For a few weeks, a couple of weeks, the whole planet would freeze. So Nut, which is something Egyptologists, because Egyptology is made up by men, they don't want to talk about her. They much rather talk about the sun, her product, her issuance, rather than talk about where the sun comes from. But I'm telling you, NUT Nut, and on my website, if you go to Sacred Nile, one word, .com, you will see and go to videos. You will see a video I prepared on Nut, of the understanding of what Nut is all about. Now, but that girl got lost in translation, in the male translation. Here's an image of African-American pilgrims. A lot of African-Americans, when they discover ancient Egypt, how do I say this? When they have disengaged from Christianity or Islam on their journey of trying to find what is their true nature, they discover Egypt, and they think and realize that Egypt is their sacred heritage. All African people, not just African Americans, because I find that British people go to Egypt for the same reason. So here's a group of people who had come to Egypt, and they had this early morning before sunrise ceremony of going down to the river, because this river is so central to the life and of African people and to the height of our culture. And this is what that looked like. That was just an exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum on Flight into Egypt. And this is an image, this image and another Egypt image they had of mine in their show, and they acquired this image for their collection. Here are another church, one of those Lalibela churches. That's the thing that you guys should Google, Lalibela, Lalibela. Lalibela is a 13th century holy city of Ethiopia, dug out from a mountain range. They went in the 13th century to the mountaintop. They dug out or etched out a footprint, and then they dug down 40 feet down and 40 feet around. And in a digging, they left behind these columns. They dug out the windows, they dug out the rooms inside, and these buildings are still used today. This is the Pope of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. This is that water that comes down out of Ethiopia that has fed the land of Egypt for millennia. There was a time when the land past Cairo was all water, what's now called a delta, and that water gradually got filled in by over millennia by this mud that took it now to where it is. These are women who believe in nature, in the old religion, who believe the divinity of nature, doing what the Egyptians had on their walls, that you purify yourself with water or with fire, with incense. And so they still do this. These are Muslims celebrating in Ethiopia. One of the temples in Egypt, a temple in Sudan. Pyramids in Sudan. This is inside one of the churches of Lalibela. This is all from the same rock. All these curves, all these windows, all made from the same rock. This is you see the pyramids in the distance. This is about another 5 miles away. These are what look like pyramids, or the high Simien mountain marks in Ethiopia. These are the statues that are about 20 feet tall of the pharaoh Amenhotep III in the West Bank. This is a view out of my tent of the desert in Sudan. because I did a lot of tenting in Sudan because most of the antiquity sites were at that time were not near any towns. They're still not near towns, but I understand they've now built some tents for tourists to stay in, but now that's not possible because of the war. Here's the sun rising in the morning, seen through the temple gates of a temple in Sudan. These temple gates look the same in Egypt. Here's a picture of a pilgrim in Ethiopia, in Lalibela, and this particular passageway connects one church to another one. Here is on the left is a temple of the woman in Ethiopia, where in the middle of this temple is a shrine, and that shrine is an upright post that's about maybe 8 or 9 feet tall, and on that post are 4 udders, the udders of the cow. And in the procession, the priestess and people fling themselves onto this udder. And on the right, you see where the Egyptian counterpart of that is. Here on the right is a cow face. You see, it looks like a woman's face. They call her Hathor. But Hathor, if you notice her ears, she has cow ears. So the whole cow thing was very important to Egypt, and it's still important on the Blue Nile, and it's still important, as I've discovered, in Rwanda. Yes.
Chester, so the cow, you said the cow was very important. Is there any link to
You stopped.
this
Is there
is there any link, you know, how the cow, we're seeing the cow's importance there, and we look at the Hindus now in modern day India, the Hindus, the cow is sacred. So is there any link? Is there any link in those religions?
Of course, there's link. Those people studied the Egyptian religion. What is the name of in the Indian religion? There's a figure that they paint blue, but the name really means black. So yes, the Egyptians gave the rest of the world the language of divinity, so that the people can go and they can apply it to their own way. Not only in India, but as an example of that language, let me point this out. As a African American, and I say our first contact is West African, and if we look at West African religion, every religion has all these different names from each other. So it's kind of perplexing, overwhelming, confusing. And as I delved into those different religions, trying to sort out what was going on, you get to learn it as what it is. But then when I studied Egyptian religion at the same time, it began to dawn upon me that what I was looking at was that everybody who had been made the migratory routes to Egypt came away from Egypt with the basic concepts of spirituality and translated into their own languages. So that if you know, but you would never understand that if you look at West African religion alone or first. But if you look at Egyptian religion and you studied how it is set up, you see it as a quilt. And you see how people took pieces, illiterate people took pieces of that quilt with them and conceptually adapted it, which is what the Indians did. So yes, they've and I haven't been to India. I've just begun to look at that, but I can't tell you the points where it has, but what I've seen, it looks very Egyptian as well. This you have people at the sacred tree, the sycamore tree. The sycamore tree is a holy tree in ancient Egypt. And it's also a holy tree for the Ethiopians. This is where the people who believe in nature go, and they believe that this tree is sacred and they have a mythology in Ethiopia for it. And their mythology is this, there was a fight between two brothers. Have you heard of that before anywhere in mythology? The fight between two brothers. In Christianity, it's Cain and Abel. In Egypt, it's Osiris and Seth. So the two brothers had a fight. One killed the other one and left it. The sister of the brothers felt that that brother deserved a burial. So she took it upon herself to make a grave and bury her brother. And after she buried her brother, she planted a tree. And that tree is supposed to represent the contact between the living and the ancestors. And that tree, the holy tree, is the sycamore tree. And this, twice a year, millions of people come to this tree in Ethiopia. And throughout Egyptian iconography, you'll find that this tree is a favorite tree of a woman, and that woman is usually Hathor. Oh, here it is. You see the pharaoh is standing? The pharaoh is standing in front of the sycamore tree. Here you have the record keeper making a record. The pharaoh stood here. This is a symbol. Wherever the pharaoh is, this symbol must be. And then here you have him standing between two other deities. Now, it's interesting, the Ashantis, their king, the Asante Hene, whenever he appears in public, there's a vessel that must accompany him, which is kind of like what Tahuti is doing here. So that sycamore tree repeats itself throughout the Blue Nile. There is a long-standing reason for it. See, here is one of those 60-degree pyramids that's unique to Sudan, as opposed to the 45-degree. And here we're looking at a cradle of civilization in Ethiopia, looking from 15,000 feet, looking down into the valley. And here you have the rainy mountains. Now, this rain here, I have to point out something to you. If you remember, I told you that 90% of the water that gets to Egypt comes out of Ethiopia.
Yes.
Okay. Now, there is another big river called the White Nile that comes out of Lake Victoria. And Lake Victoria is much bigger than Lake Tana. So why doesn't all the water from Lake Victoria be the major supplier to the water to Egypt? And there's a geographic reason for that. The water from Lake Victoria, White Nile, gets caught up in a 500-mile swamp. It's called the Sud. Look at on your maps, SUDD. Now what happens? That Sud is caught in southern Sudan, hot, 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 hot. And over time, it can't go anywhere, but the sun evaporates the water. He evaporates that water and it becomes clouds. And then the wind from the west takes those clouds over to the eastern mountains of Ethiopia and falls for 4 months straight on Ethiopia. So the Creator, in his infinite wisdom, used what's called transpiration. It transpires that water up to the clouds, taken by the wind over to the mountains, and the mountains are too high for it to pass, so it disintegrates. It falls on Ethiopia. And that water falls on those mountains and eventually winds up into Lake Tana, and eventually comes through the Blue Nile River falls, and eventually in Khartoum meets up with the White Nile and continues on to the Mediterranean. And in Khartoum, you can actually see where the rivers mix. Because in Khartoum, the water that's coming out of the mountains of Ethiopia is bluer. In Khartoum, the water that was stuck in the swamp comes out whitish. So you can, at the point where they come together, you can actually see the mixing of the two different rivers. And that's why, what I just told you, is why that difference. Here, women who believe in nature, on Lake Tana at night, Islamic prayer in sacred caves in Ethiopia, a priest at a Christian sacred cave in Ethiopia. This is at nighttime. You see the stars out. Hebrews in Ethiopia blowing the shofar. They don't call it the shofar. They call it the meleket. It's a ram's horn. With the ram's horn, the way you get that is that you have to burn out when the ram horn comes off. It's twisted. So the only way you can untwist it is you have to heat it up. So they use fire and they heat it up. And as it gets, the hotter it gets, the more malleable the bone gets. And that way you can begin to stretch it out. Here's the sycamore tree with those who believe in the divinity and the name of their god they call Waka. And here's a temple to Amen in Sudan. Here's what the sky looks like in Aswan. Is a temple in northern Sudan built by Tutankhamun's grandfather in Soleb. Here's a temple to the moon, which means to the woman, built in Ethiopia, the Temple of Yeha. And here you have similar symbols. One you find in the tombs of ancient Egypt. One you find in the hands of the Oromo people, elder in southern Ethiopia. Oromo, they're the people who believe in the god Waka. They believe the sky god is called Waka. They believe in the divinity of nature. Here's a female ruler again, which would be called a Kandaki or a queen, Egyptian. Ethiopia, Lalibela. This is the great Nile coming out of the mountains of Ethiopia. Look at this. The mountain is so high, some clouds are below it. And it's those clouds that empty onto these mountains that they condense into this river that goes down for thousands of miles. Here's a puddle of the river in Aswan. Here is the Holy Family. The Holy Family, y'all. Here's the mama. Here's the daddy. Here's the son. And here's the Pharaoh, Ramses, on his knees, worshiping the Holy Father, Amen, A-M-E-N.
But that word A-M-E-N is the word that used the word over. I thought it's Hebrew or something, or Greek.
No, they've tried to change the Egyptologists. See, this is what happened. The Egyptologists tend to prefer the word A-M-U-N, A-M-O-N. But the Egyptians themselves clearly said A-M-N. This is how they get away with it. See, Egypt hieroglyph is a consonant-based language. It has very few vowels. So, and because we don't know, the Egyptians would know which vowel to drop in between which consonant. But because we don't know, it gives people who want to be deniers the option to go for A-M-O-N or A-M-U-N. And also you have to remember, when the glyphs were being translated by Champollion, the Catholic Church was very concerned because they did not want competition with they had adopted Amen, and they probably knew for the right reasons, but they didn't want people to know that it was that close. So they encouraged Egyptologists and Champollion to use the vowel O and the O or the U rather than the E. But they tricked themselves because the king's names come out as Amenhotep or Amen this, Amen that. They always had the name God in their name. So like if you go in a Christian church and they say, well, the first thing I say is I may want to give blessings to God in the heavens or whatever. The Egyptian pharaohs would do the same thing, but the first blessing they want to give to God is A-M-E-N. So that is a corrected thing. So the church knew they couldn't get rid of this word, amen, because it has been in the psyche of people's minds. So they changed it. It's not the Holy Family and it's not God, but they had to keep it in the scripture somehow. So, and then they use it in as an ending of something. And there's no more powerful word than amen in any scripture. And you wonder why that is so. Amen is a name that our people gave to the invisible one, the one who creates all. After it came out of Nut. Here you have Ramses the Great, his statues, which is about 12 stories high, the statue in his temple. This is a temple built like the Egyptian, not until the Ethiopian churches were built that dug out of the rock. This was the last such piece of architecture that existed. This architecture is completely out of the mountain. Inside of it, you find huge rooms. On the front, they carved out the statues of Ramses, but it's the same technology. Instead of taking construction material to the site, they went and took everything away from the site to leave behind a temple. Remnants of tombs, landscape of a cemetery in Sudan. Here you're looking at some of the columns in the Temple of Karnak, the Temple of Amen. On the left, Ethiopian Hebrews. On the right is Ethiopian Muslims. Here's a remainder of a wall from the Temple of Amen at Karnak. This is the home of Amen. The Sudanese, the Nubians said that Amen started with them. Well, it makes sense if you think about migration, because the children, this whole migratory route come from Lucy. The people started first at the highlands with Lucy, and then they migrated downhill. Some migrated down the Nile Trench, others migrated down to Southern Africa on the North and South rivers, and then some migrated by taking the East-West rivers. So the children of Ethiopia are the ones who brought with them this culture and this religion to Sudan and then to Egypt. It's their children and their children's. And here you have this mountain they call as the home of God, the home of Amen. Inside one, here is in Ethiopia, Lalibela, my first trip in 1974. The year after my first trip to Ethiopia, when I heard about these churches in 73, and I went back the next year to photograph them. So you see the churches sitting inside the mountain. And now the Temple of Ramses the Great that I was just talking about recently, I showed you the 4 statues out front. This is the huge room. This is the biggest room inside of it. It has about maybe 6 rooms, but this is a room where you walk past standing statues of Ramses. And in the back, you have the Holy of Holies where you make your offerings. This is one of the experimental pyramids. It's called the Bent Pyramid, because it was their first experiments of trying to make a pure pyramid for that the body of the king could have a room inside to remain. And as they were making this pyramid, at some point, all of this mass rocks began to shift and move inside of itself. So they had to quickly shore up the tomb that they were making, and they had to change, in order to finish it, they had to change the trajectory. That's why it's the Bent Pyramid. Here in Lalibela, you see one of the churches. This is the smallest church. You see how the edge of the rock, the edge of the mountain, where they went down 40 feet, is nice and clean. And then you see the courtyard of it. This is how all the churches are, sunken into the mountain. And you see the walls of the church were separated from the mountain. The doors of the church are separated. The windows are separated. The building itself, the steps are separated from the mountain. And sitting inside of its nest. And you see early evening with the stars coming up on the horizon. On the left, Islam, practicing Islam. On the right, practicing the Hebrew. Here's a Christian church. That's on the other side of this is a mile drop. It's treacherous getting into here, but they tell people, fear not, because if you can trek up this 8,600-foot mountain that would take all day, and then trek past this short thing that's probably only 8 inches wide, because you have to face the rock while you're doing it, else you'll fall. There's a 1 mile fall. So they say that whoever goes up here, God gives you another 40 years on your life. There's the solar sun.
Great.
Muslims in Ethiopia praying. Muslims at a feast for a bachelor's party. The tradition around churches of the Ethiopians. Temple of the Woman in the Temple of Philae in Egypt, the last temple to survive the Roman Empire. Temple of Amen, Temple of the Man in Karnak. Temple of Amen in Sudan. Ethiopian priest with his Bible, all written in Amharic, or actually in Guz, which is Guz is their Latin to our language. So their language, Amharic, this is their Latin. It's called Guz.
Chester, in all
Yeah.
this, we see you exploring spirituality in different aspects. You've touched on the Muslims and everywhere. I stand to be corrected. You were a child pastor back then. I stand to be corrected. You were a child pastor. So how has your involvement, how did your involvement with photography change or influence your view on spirituality?
Well, yes, I was a child pastor. I became a minister at 9, but I became
Wow.
I became disenchanted with the church. My grandfather was a minister. I became disenchanted with the church and with people because I didn't think that but I saw church as a misfit. And when I got to college at Tuskegee, I took a course on world religion. And to my amazement, I discovered Hinduism, I discovered Buddhism, I discovered all the other many denominations. And what I found interesting was that the human could reach a divine point without having to be in exclusive relationship. So the exclusivity of Christianity fell off. The exclusivity of anything fell off. But I understand that I must say, I am a student of religion, not a consumer. But I understand and appreciate all the effort that anybody puts into trying to make themselves better people. And what this book is about is really about trekking or following the steps of sacred imagination and how it has manifested itself from the beginning as the sacred manifestation of us being a part of nature to the sacred manifestation of patriarch religion. So I've looked at everyone. I've not tried to cast judgment. I'm just looking at how they have manifested their particular conversation with the divine. So yes, I look at, I give them all a chance to express themselves, to show the best of themselves, and to show what I'm also particularly interested in is how these expressions have correspondence with each other, knowingly or unknowingly. So that does answer your question?
Oh, yes, it does. You've also drawn parallels when we look at how, like the story of the Holy Family, and we see the virgin birth, the impossible birth. We also see the story. I think there's someone in Egyptology who was put in a reed, who was hid in a basket of some sort, and we have Moses in Christianity, and you've drawn parallels. So does that in any way discredit the Bible, or we're saying, because Egypt is BC, this is all BC, what are we saying with regards to that?
Well, absolutely. And what I think I'm saying to people of patriarchal religion is that your religion rests on the shoulders of this earlier religion, because the whole, as you study Egyptology, the vocabulary of divinity, all of it comes out of Egypt. The word soul, faith, forgiveness, purification, uh, God, all of these many stories, all of these many concepts, impossible birth, or all of it comes out. All of it comes out of Egypt. There's no word that has been created in theology that does not find its antecedent in Egyptian thought, in African thought. So, in a way, I wanted to present that we have a incredible heritage. We have an incredible inheritance, and that we should not give that up uh, because of some narrative that says that it's unholy or impure. That's not the case. When you see the full story, you realize it's not the case, and you realize that maybe much to your dismay, we have been victimized by a narrative that has not served us well. But how will we know that unless we see the evidence that I'm showing you in this book?
Just while you're at the evidence, I know your work has been criticized on the grounds that it lacks academic backing. But here you've done primary research over 50 years. How have you refuted such claims that it lacks academic? Does that discredit, does that lessen the value of the work you've put in there?
Well, I say to anybody who say that, disprove whatever I put to you. That's all. Go back, go. I put you in the place. I've given you information where it is. Two things. I did not try to create an academic book because my audience would be too small. I wanted people to be able to come to this information and who are not academics or who are academics, and they both are going to be treated the same. They're going to be treated the same with evidence. Now, if you doubt that evidence, Google it. I dare anybody to Google the evidence that I brought to you and find that it's not academically substantiated. I have advisors, many PhD advisors who have read this material, who know this material. So it's been scrutinized academically. But even in that scrutiny, I wanted to maintain as a book that anybody is approachable, because I want as many people as possible to embrace this, to see and know and embrace this material. But none of it, absolutely none of it, is not factual. And if you do the same research that I do, or do your own research, unless you want to go into have academic dissonance, then you have to see that what I've presented to you is a legitimate, serious study. No, I do refute a lot of the dissonance of Egyptologists, European Egyptologists who are invested in the non-Africanity of Egypt. Yes, those people will have problems with me because I have not centered their narrative. I have not centered their miseducation. This is my book, not their book. But those people, there are many members of those people who embrace what I have done as knowing that, wow, finally, we don't have to read stuff in dissonance anymore. We don't have to read stuff and think, am I an idiot? Am I not seeing something? So those who feel like, people feel however they feel, but the material is legitimate, and I think it will stand the scrutiny of unbiased research.
Wow. And Chester, because you've done primary research, which is a key component in authenticating anything. So this is authentic. I think I've seen on one of the reviews that there's a tomb that you have a picture of, which has an inscription, which we later see in one of the Psalms. Can we see that?
Which one is this?
Like there's one of the pictures with showing a tomb with an inscription, and that inscription is almost similar to one of David's Psalms in the Bible.
So you're talking about the tomb of Unas.
Oh, that's Unas. Oh, yes. May you just give us comment on, because this is
no. If it's the David Psalm, no. This is. What you mean this one? Because this is what's called the hymn to the sun. It's by Akhenaten, where he says, you rise high in the horizon, and it's people think of the 23rd Psalm. That they think the 23rd Psalm is a derivative of this particular hymn that this particular pharaoh or king is offering, who saw the sun as being the center of everything and life-giving. In fact, the life-giving sun had little hands that came down that fed the breath, because God is breath. And this is his wife, Nefertiti, and this is 2 of their 4 daughters. So this is that particular one. The one of Unas has to do with the 10 Commandments. But this has to do with, this is what people think of the 23rd Psalm when they look at the hymn. It's called the Hymn to the Aten, A-T-E-N. If you Google it, you'll get the text. Hymn to the Aten. Yeah, I say it here. The Aten of the solar disk, but what I don't say here is that you can find it as a hymn, Hymm, to the Aten, A-T-E-N.
Wow. This is interesting. And you also touched on the issue of how ancient Egypt gave meaning to most of the words we use in theology, faith. I'm looking back in my own language, Shona. I've been told by one of our friends, Dr. Muswe, he follows ancient Egypt a lot, and he's told me, Chen, can you see how we have, is it Heru or Heru? Heru, meaning is it night or Horus? But in Shona, we have the word Maneru, it means evening, it means night. We have the word Apet, which he says it's Egypt for like the one who finishes, the one who completes, who solves things. And in Shona, we have the word Apeda, meaning it's done. So how is this language, even the general language, how is it cascaded down from Egypt all the way down to Southern Africa? We were told we are just Bantu. We never thought we had roots in Egypt.
By 7,000 years of pilgrimage. See, Egypt was to Africa what Mecca is to Muslims, what Rome is to Christians for thousands of years. So, and Egypt held these festivals almost weekly that were the pilgrims would come. And, it was a place where the founding fathers of Egypt wanted a place of peace, where people could be at peace with themselves and at peace with nature. And these pilgrims come and went. The untold story about Egypt is the Exodus, not the Exodus that's the narrative you read in the Old Testament, but there was always, these pilgrims were always coming and going, and the ancient highways were rivers. But the Exodus happened in Egypt when Egypt became invaded. When the Hyksos invaded, you had an Exodus. When the Assyrians invaded, you had an Exodus. When the Persians invaded, you had an Exodus. When the Macedonians invaded, you had an Exodus. When the Romans invaded, you had an Exodus. The story that has not been told is the African Exodus out of Egypt. People just don't even, it's not a thought on people's horizon. But these exodus and these pilgrims is what brought the knowledge out of Egypt and then took that knowledge and spread it throughout the continent. 7,000 years is a very long time. This country, the United States of America, has only been here 200 years. And look how vastly people are influenced by it. If you're there for 7,000 years, and it's your continents responding to you, these thoughts and these ideas will travel because people will come, they will ingest these ideas, they will process them, and then they will leave with them and they will go back. And then they will try to share them with their kinfolk. And as they try to share them with their kinfolk, it may mean renaming things, but finding the name in your language that means that same concept is a task that everybody does. But it's because of the pilgrimages back and forth. And after the pilgrimages, the voluntary pilgrimage back and forth, then it became the involuntary exodus, one way out. Because when the Exodus happened, it was only one when the invading armies came from the north over the 200-mile land bridge that connects Egypt to the rest of the world. The people were stuck in the middle, and the only way they could escape was to go south. So that caused them to go south to Aswan, south along all the way down to Khartoum, where the river splits, so that some then would go uphill. But I imagine most people would take the path of least resistance and go along the White Nile, which then takes them eventually to the river states. And the river states, then those rivers would take along the way to the river states. They'll run into the Niger going east, two or three rivers that goes east, and then they'll run into the whole group of states that comes out of Lake Victoria and the river states, and that would take them down to Zimbabwe.
Okay, and now we are here. Chester, will you please take us to that picture where I think it's a mummy, the golden one.
Oh, the golden coffin.
And we see the night sky above it. We said King Tut, is it? Yeah, the golden one.
Yeah. Yep. Let me see. I have a better one actually. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it. Can you make it bigger? Make it full screen.
Oh.
Oops. Huh. Does that help?
Oh, yes, it does. So when I look at this picture, okay, you explain how you did it all, but when I see it, I'm seeing the contrast of the night sky with the star and I'm looking at identity. I can sort of identify to say, this is black. Okay, it's all black. And that black is magnifying or amplifying the beauty of this, is it a mummy? Of this mummy. And then I remember Malcolm X said, who made you hate yourself? And it's all coming to mind just looking at this. And in this book, I believe you have unpacified some of our thinking. And now, can you just explain the process it took, or what this means to you, what this specific picture means to you?
Well, it means that, there was a time when we really cared about how we bury each other. And, but all of Egyptian art is about consciousness. The consciousness of the body of the king being a god, a figure, and they thought that the skin of the gods were gold. The whole thing about flight and ascension to heaven, look, he has a wing. There's a bird surrounding his casket. That bird is going to take him to the afterlife, take him to the heavens. these collars above what this doesn't show is floral collars that would have been buried next to him, which tells us what month of the year he was buried. Now, this particular, there's 3 coffins of gold. This is heavy gold. 3 coffins of gold that his body is laid into. And actually, this is the second coffin. And then these are, this is a composite because this is a coffin, but the face to this particular coffin looks like somebody else, number 1. Number 2, my picture of it did not show it as being, and when I made it in situ, did not reflect the glory of it that I thought it should. So this is the original gold portrait that you see that's on exhibit at the museum that I was able to photograph in 1999 with proper lighting. Lighting is very important in making great pictures. And with this lighting, I was able to photograph that particular statue and then layer that statue to replace that other face with this face. And then in my mind, being conscious in symbolism, to me, there's 2 things you have to understand here. Excuse me. This man was buried 3,200 years ago. He was discovered 100 years ago. So for 3,100 years, he's been asleep in the heavens. So I thought it was only fair, after I had been learning, as I was learning astrophotography, that I place him in the heavens, that I place him back with Newt. Why with Newt? Newt, in every casket in Egypt, there's underneath the top, there is a woman. She's stretching her hands above you and she's welcoming you back home. This woman's name is Newt. The same Newt of the sky who created everything, she's welcoming you back home to her. She's in the night sky. She's in every picture. If you go into a museum and you see a mummy cases, the top of the mummy case is what people look at, or they look at the side. But nobody tries to peek to see what is the image underneath the lid. And sometimes they do it in the back of it too. But that image is of the woman Newt. She is foremost the most important thing in their life. But the men don't talk about it. So here, he's back with Newt. For me. And you see him with his wing birds has taken him, he need wings to take him up. Everything is symbolic consciousness with Egyptians. Nothing was haphazard. Everything was intentional. Everything meant something. And all of it is philosophy. That's what religion teaches us. Religion is based upon metaphysics and philosophy. And it's all a product of thinking about our people. I'm sorry.
Yes, of our people. Oh yeah, no, go on. Yes, like I was just going to reiterate what you said, that it's all about our people. Yeah.
It's all about our people. Our people are great people, except we don't realize it. And we're the last one to know it. Everybody else knows it. Everybody else knows that we got all the wealth in the world. That's why they keep us divided so they can come steal it.
Yeah. And like I think Professor D normally says that he does what he does with WAFORD to help his people tell their own stories, reclaim their agency. And this is what exactly we gain from your work here, what you're doing to make us, people of African descent, Africans, tell their own stories, appreciate who they are and where they come from, and that cannot be underestimated. I think at this time, I would like to open the floor to everyone who has questions. There are some questions already coming into the private inbox. So everyone, Chester, we want to thank you so much for this profound insight that you've given into the journey of the 50 years. And now, thank you. So all questions, people, you can raise your hand or you can type it in the chat box. And then I will also read out some of the questions that have come to